Hello, everybody. Welcome back to History of Westeros podcast. We've got a special episode tonight, trying to get back to our usual live stream schedule after our short hiatus after the season. Thanks for joining us on a Friday. It's our second week in a row that we've done a Friday. We're not intending to always be on Fridays. It just kind of worked out that way. We have guests and work schedules and all that we have to work around, and we find the time when we can to hang out with you guys. So thanks again for joining us. Now, I would guess that nearly all of you, whether you're watching this live or watching it after the fact, have tried to get someone else to watch Game of Thrones. You've explained why you're obsessed with it, why you love it so much, why it's worth watching, why it's worth getting involved with. And maybe you've had varying levels of success with that, or maybe you were someone that got started that way. Maybe you got convinced by someone else, and that's how you got started. And if you're here tonight, then that must have been a good thing for you because you're here. You must have enjoyed it. You must have been worth your time. And so you became one of us. One of us. And tonight, that's what we're all about. We've got a special guest here today, and we're going to try to convince him to become one of us. One of us.
I don't think you're starting off great with that one of us talk.
I've already ruined it. I'm already starting off on the wrong foot.
Yeah, so we've got Todd Robert Anderson here. He's most known for You're the Worst, which is how we know him. But we've also seen him in Andrew Tribeca. He most recently was in Ray Donovan. He's been in Weeds. And I just want to mention that he was in Blast from the Past because I love that movie. And I didn't realize he was in it until I looked him up and I saw a picture. I was like, that was him. And that's awesome. It's a great movie with Brendan Fraser if you haven't seen it.
That was my first ever theatrical job.
Yeah.
Blast from the Past.
Oh, wow. So is it actual start. Blast from the Past?
Yeah, it really is. I also appear very briefly on this show, a Netflix show called American Vandal.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Okay.
If you've not heard of it or seen it, I wouldn't plug it because I'm barely in it, but the show is hilarious. Okay. So I'm plugging it because I actually was like, I forgot I had done it, and then it started, and I was like, oh shit, this show is really good. So watch that show.
Was Blast from the Past your actual first theatrical? Like you weren't in drama in high school or nothing?
Well, when I say theatrical, I mean a movie or TV show I got paid for.
Fair, all right.
I did a lot of stuff for free before moving out to LA, and I did a few commercials before I did Blast from the Past. That's what I mean.
All right.
Cool.
We also hadn't been super familiar with some of your other stuff, but obviously when we had you on, we were going to look into it, and we discovered that you have this review show called Film Pigs with Stephen Falk, who also does You're the Worst, who created it, and you've got a podcast, Jason and Todd Talk Through Lousy Films, so you seem to like talking about movies.
I'm definitely a cinephile and obsessed with movies. I wish I could walk you out into my garage so you could see the video store that I have in it.
It's an old Blockbuster.
I used to work for Blockbuster, Todd.
I am stuck in the past. I like to have plastic boxes with plastic discs inside them to go and pick out what I want to watch from.
I so feel you. I used to work at Blockbuster. I own hundreds of DVDs. My closet just stacked with them. And I like to be able to give them to people. Like, here, watch this. You know what I mean? I don't even care if they give it back. But
yeah, I'm definitely the opposite. I see this big stack of DVDs on the shelf. We have a big bookshelf here in this room, and it's got books. And for a while, there was one shelf that was full of DVDs, and I was like, why? All of these could be in a notebook. We could put more stuff up here on this shelf. Never did, but
that's absolutely true. I mean, I think it's a thing. I think it's like collecting vinyl or whatever kind of old timey tech you collect that has your entertainments on it. And I worked in several video stores as a kid, so I think it's nostalgic and I think it's a problem. I'm going to be honest. I think it's just a problem.
Worst problems to have.
I'm right in the middle between both of you guys because I like DVDs and Blu-rays, but only when they have a bunch of extras, a bunch of special features. That's my thing. I love BTS stuff. I will collect all the DVDs I can and Blu-rays of things to get it, but I don't care about owning it myself personally. I just rip it and put it on my computer. So
I get it. Yeah, most of my friends have moved on, and that's the way they are. But I'm also the other reason, if there aren't special features on a Blu-ray or a DVD that's newly released, I will buy it if it's a proper widescreen thing and it's in the proper aspect ratio, and that hasn't been available before. And sometimes it's available on streaming first, but there's a lot of obscure titles that are getting released on Blu-ray now that I'd forgotten about that were big like in the 80s, and I got the VHS tapes and it was so exciting. But now they're coming out and they're in widescreen, so it's like I'm seeing these movies for the first time because I grew up watching them in the 4:3 aspect ratio.
God help you if you have the wrong aspect ratio.
I can't stand it. I am insane about aspect ratios. I get mad at my friends if I come over and they put on a movie and it's like squished or stretched out, and they will watch it for 20 minutes and I have to stop. I'm like, do you guys know the aspect ratio is horrible? And they're like, you're a jerk. Why do you care about that? And I'm like, because it looks like everybody's like short and fat.
It's like if the first line was missing from each page of a book, you know? Like,
the first word of every
the whole
sentence.
book, you know?
Yes. Thank you. That is such a good analogy. Thank you.
Here for you.
We have a super chat from our friend Steven Stark who says, "Welcome, Todd. Ashea is still the best."
Still
we
true.
have a trend around here of referring to Ashea as the best because she is. So
it is true. So
you'll catch
on
on.
that note, we should move on and tell people about how this episode came about.
Yes.
So in You're the Worst, Todd's character Vernon Barbara has a podcast, Vernon Down the House, and because we have a podcast, it's one of our favorite things, especially because he has a sponsorship from Red Napkin, which anyone listening to us will know about. Blue Apron.
Yeah, we've had Blue Apron sponsorship, so we got that joke just hits home for us, and I really appreciate that in the writing for the show. Now, of course, for people who, if we didn't mention it, You're the Worst airs on FXX and on Wednesdays, and it's currently in season, which is great.
In season 4.
Season 4, and you know, most shows don't even get to a season 4, so that's great. You can tell just by that it's a quality show. But we've been watching it since the beginning. Anyway, the reality, you know, even though it's a comedy show, the details of this podcast, this fictional podcast, Vernon Down the House, is actually pretty well done. It's accurate to like how a real podcast would run in a lot of ways, and that's just one of the many details we appreciate about You're the Worst. And of course, the main thing is that it's hilarious. But
right, well, I agree with you. I think part of the reason it is so good is the writer's attention to detail. I mean, there's little things I think that only I get. I swear to God. I'm like, I don't know who else is going to get that. I feel like they wrote that just to let me know they cared, you know?
That's a fairly, well, I wouldn't say there's people that only one person gets something about Game of Thrones, but Game of Thrones is the same kind of thing where the show is geared towards a mainstream audience, but it has levels where, you know, if you're obsessed like we are, and pretty much everyone who's here attending this live stream, you can miss all those big details and still enjoy the show. But if you're looking out for these great details, you find them, and that's really fun. That adds to the enjoyment. You know,
on the surface, you're gonna have, you know, some warrior fighting some bad guy with his sword, and there's a dragon flying around, and some hot chick's gonna save the day or whatever. But we're like, look at the hilt of the sword. Look at the hilt. That's a wolf. You know.
That's right.
We did get a
look at the brooch. Chat. Look at the brooch on his cloak.
Look at the aspect ratio on his armor.
We got a super chat from our friend Acre Frey, who has a bit of a running joke that he likes to have guests of ours say a certain phrase. So you're going to have to say this for us, Todd. It's Irish wristwatch.
Yes, try to say it without messing it up.
3 times
Very
fast.
hard.
3 times?
3 times fast.
Irish wristwatch. Irish wristwatch. Irish wristwatch.
Whoa.
Pretty good.
That was good.
Pretty good.
That was really hard, you guys.
Most people think it's not going to be so hard, and then they mess it up. But you nailed it. That was good.
Before You're the Worst, I probably wouldn't have been able to do that. But they write such bizarre, tongue-twisty lines with weird, abbreviated words for Vernon.
Oh, yeah.
Wrapping my mind around some of those monologues has been really difficult.
Well, and you have not only do you have a fictional podcast of the show, but you have a real podcast, and that's one of the cool things I imagine that you've experienced in your career as having a podcast and being on TV is that sometimes you never know who's going to just somebody that's you've heard of that is actually enjoys your show or your podcast, and that's what we're dealing with here.
I don't know that anyone actually enjoys my podcast. I have a couple of them.
Just so you know.
Oh, thank you.
I really did, yeah.
The Film Pigs one, or
yeah. Shay and I each watched a bunch of different
ones.
episodes, but we weren't watching the same ones. I watched a slice, if you will, from like late 2000s, where you guys were just like in your car after a movie, barely sober.
Yeah, little vlogs. Yeah,
yeah.
And I watched a bunch of the ones where you had different guests, like Doug Benson talking about stoner movies and stuff like that. Because I like stoner movies, so I was curious.
Yeah, that was the Geek Nation web series.
We watched the web series. That's what I watched a bunch of.
Now, Doug Benson, of course, is in You're the Worst as well, a little bit.
I totally forgot about that.
Is that a connection? Is that part of how that all came to be together, or you guys just all know each other?
No, I was a big fan of Doug Benson, like from when he started Doug Loves Movies, which I just happened upon, and I just liked it. But really what it was is Doug would bother Falk because Falk was a producer on Weeds for a while, which is part of the reason I was on Weeds.
Cool.
But Benson would tweet him and say, when am I going to get to be on Weeds? When am I going to get to be on Weeds?
It seems like he belongs at least a little bit.
Right, and that makes sense. But it never, transpired, but here he is on You're the Worst. So, tenacity.
Right on.
Leave it to a pothead to have tenacity.
That's how that works.
Doug is a very special kind of pothead. I mean, this guy has multiple shows. I've been lucky enough because of You're the Worst to do a few of them, including the YouTube, Jash series, Getting Doug with High.
You've been on that?
I didn't realize that. I would have totally watched that.
The least watched episode of that show.
I've seen a bunch of episodes too, and I haven't seen that one. Now
I was on. Well, it's usually more famous people. It was me and a comedian named Rick Glassman and a porn star named Janice somebody. And I think that's why it's just he didn't have the biggest names on that.
I think that should be
episode.
Her porn name, Janice somebody. By the way. I like it.
Griffith. That's what it is. Janice Griffith, I think, is her name, which is so modern. That's not the kind of porn star name I grew up with at all.
There's no fruit name or color in there at all.
It doesn't sound like a cute puppy or something. I don't know. It's just Janice Griffith. She does porn. She's all right.
She gets hot. So that's cool.
She's a nice lady. Yeah.
Okay, so why don't we get started with the convincing part here? We can try to work on you a little bit here. A little body, a few blows to the body.
You had a question for him, yeah.
We do have some questions, yes.
Before you do, let me just give you my. I just want to give you some fodder.
Yeah, tell us. You told us that you've resisted watching GOT. So we wanted to ask if resisting is an accurate word and why.
Well, there's a number of reasons.
Okay.
One, I feel like I've been burned by too many serialized shows. So I often wait for however many 5-10 years it takes for the thing to run out and be over.
Yeah.
And then I find out from people, does it maintain its entertainment value the whole time? Does it drop off? I'm specifically referring to a TV show from a long, long time ago called Lost.
I'm with you. I quit that show too. In season 4, I was like, no more. I'm done with this.
But I didn't quit. Because I was raised Catholic. And granted, I lapsed that shit a long time ago.
I watched it to the end, and I was raised Baptist.
I don't know why Baptists would stick with it, but it's just like I gotta find out how this turns out, which I think was why I kept going to Catholic church for so long, just out of the fear of if I don't see how this ends, I might be, adrift on a desert island.
Were you guys watching Lost in church? Is that?
No, I just mean returning to it in the way you do to church. Like there's a habitual thing, and you don't want to miss out, and you don't want to offend anybody, and you don't want to make the creators mad. So I didn't want to upset Lindelof or Abrams or any of those guys by quitting, one. And two, I really did want to know what the hell where it was going, but as the show went on, I kept saying, well, there's answers. Like, what? Walt's still gone, and he was supposed to be the Jesus character, and is he ever going to come back? And the polar bears were in a zoo, and what was that about? And like the button they kept having to push, why does that not matter anymore? And I was waiting for those answers, and then in the end, they're all in purgatory, which is basically like waking up from a dream to fix everything. I was so mad. So that's why I'm resistant to serialized.
So let me ask, did that burn you? Did you never watch The Leftovers then, which just finished its third and final season? Also by
No,
Lindelof?
I didn't watch The Leftovers.
I did not watch The Leftovers for that reason.
Leftovers. Like I like the idea of The Leftovers. I like the idea of the what's it called, where only the people who are bad are still left on Earth, sort of thing. What is that? The Rapture.
The Rapture.
Mm-hmm.
I like the idea of the Rapture as a story, and I've liked movies about it. But when I read the concept that it's some people are raptured, but most people actually aren't, I was like, well, that doesn't.
Well, it wasn't necessarily the rapture. They kept it kind of vague.
Vague.
They weren't trying to figure out the mystery. It really, what it was about is like after this happens, it was like 3% or something.
3%
The population goes, which can be devastating, especially if like one of the 3%'s a pilot on a plane at the moment or whatever, But the thing is, like the next day, like you still gotta cook breakfast. The kids gotta go to school. You still go to work. Like life just had to keep going, and it's just about the characters in this world trying to continue their lives. So it was more of a drama about people dealing with the loss than this mystery of what happened.
I'll say I didn't watch Lost, and I was turned off originally of the idea of watching The Leftovers because of how it was made fun of. Lost was, and then I learned that The Leftovers was going to be 3 set finite seasons. I read that they weren't going to explain what happened, and it sold me on it. I was like, well, those were the issues before, so I'm going to give it a shot. I really liked it, not more than Game of Thrones, so I'm not about to recommend that to you over this, though.
I was, since I'm the person here who watched Lost and quit, I was too burned by that to give Leftovers much of a try. But since they tried it and we all live in the same house here, I started to watch it with them. And I looked at the ratings on IMDb, and the 3rd episode had a really high rating, and it was the highest rated episode of season 1. And I still didn't even like that episode, so I was like, well, this isn't for me. But
well, there's that.
Yeah, go ahead.
With Game of Thrones, okay, so there was a show on the Stars channel called Spartacus.
Oh yeah.
Did you guys watch that?
I tried it, but I did not like it.
I saw Rome.
I was like, nah. I gave it a thumbs down.
Oh well, okay. I'm going to disagree with you there, and
I only watched one episode. To be fair,
right? It's obviously a very tonally very different thing than Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But hear me out here. Here's what I loved about Spartacus. It's uber gory. There's a lot of fighting and shock value to it. But it has a sense of humor and a camp element to it.
I like camp.
And as many naked ladies as there are on the show, there is an almost equal amount of naked dudes, which keeps my wife from getting pissed off, because if it's all female nudity, she's like, this is some bullshit. But it measured out nicely. In the first season, Spartacus.
So it's for your wife that you want the male nudity. Just sure, okay.
It's
go ahead.
for my wife.
For your wife, okay.
I got no problem with it. I got no. You saw the 3rd season of You're the Worst. I clearly don't have a problem with male
Good point.
So this is the show that I liked, and I can understand not liking it because it was over the top. All right. So when Game of Thrones was first announced, and I didn't know anything about the books, I was like, oh, it sounds like Spartacus with dragons. But then my friend Steve Skelton said, oh, slow down. Because he was watching the first season is like they keep talking about dragons, but there's no dragons. And he said to me, he said, I don't think you're gonna like this show. It's very slow burn.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the first season. I understand there's more dragons now, but he's like, and they keep talking about dragons that don't show up. And I was like, oh, that sounds like it would totally piss me off. So that's why I stayed away from it.
All right. Well, two questions. One, since you watched Spartacus, did you watch Rome by any chance? Just curious.
I watched some of Rome, it bored me.
I imagine it's a bit slower. I've watched it in the last few years, and it's only 2 seasons. So that wasn't my point, but definitely one of my angles I was going to convince you with was that there are dragons, a lot of dragons, and who doesn't like dragons? But if it's too slow burn, which pun intended, I assume you meant that slow burn. It's worth it. I'm not really.
Well, if there are no dragons for a long time, then there's no burn.
no burn. Yeah. But I'm not a big dragon fan. Like, I'm not some crazy dragon fan. But I like them fine. But after the most recent season of Game of Thrones, with the kind of dragon action they had, I was sold. I never before did I think dragons were all like gung ho, rah, awesome. But now I'm into dragons.
They got their
they did it.
They got their budget continuously increased like every year, and so they were
the
able
visual
to,
effects are pretty spectacular.
Yeah,
for sure.
and you start off basically what you start off with is small dragons, and they grow as the seasons go. So by the time you get to the later seasons, they're big and dangerous and nasty, and the budget is huge, and so they can fully.
Technology is better too.
Yeah,
they're just better at making.
Yeah, they're just better. Yeah, like a show that's been around this while, they just got good at it. Yeah.
Well, I like dragons I'm a movie junkie, you know, I like movies. And that was always a complaint I had, is there aren't enough good dragon movies.
Yeah.
Well, there's so few dragon movies. Pete's Dragon doesn't count. Like what's the one with Dennis Quaid and Sean Connery is the Dragonheart. Friendly dragons are bullshit. Not into friendly dragons. But there's so few like awesome, and I swear to God, Reign of Fire.
Yes.
The best dragon movie.
I think I agree. I was going to ask if you had seen it. That's awesome.
I have literally been saying for more than a decade that Reign of Fire is the best post-apocalyptic dragon film of all time. I'm not kidding. It's the only DVD I've ever purchased. Remember I was talking about how I'm not onto DVDs? It's literally the only one I've ever bought. It was kind of a joke because, you know, I had to maintain that.
Because there aren't a lot of apocalyptic dragon films. They usually take place in the past.
Well, because they made one so awesome, no one else is bothered. Like, how can you top it? I mean...
No. It's like saying Shakes the Clown is the Citizen Kane of alcoholic clown movies. That's a irrefutable statement from Jay Carr of the Boston Globe. It's absolutely true.
So we have another super chat from Steven Stark. It says, slow burn, but best payoffs on TV. And yeah, I mean, that is one of the things about Game of Thrones. When you have a show, like you say, a show like Lost, it doesn't have any source material it's based off of, and you don't know that it's going to continue. You don't know that it's going to have a full lifespan. So I personally am very hesitant to get involved in almost any TV show these days unless a bunch of my friends are already watching it and I just can't avoid it, or it's already had a few seasons. Basically, once it's kind of got that, like, hey, we're a good show, we're going to probably stick around. Once it has that safety, you know? And Game of Thrones, of course, is not going anywhere. It's only got one season left.
It's got one season left, but you have plenty of time to watch it before that and to be part of this pop culture phenomenon that it's gonna be for the final season. Yeah. But they're also writing a bunch of different successor shows, and we're gonna get at least one Game of Thrones spin-off show. So you're not gonna escape Game of Thrones in the future. They're writing like 5 different ones, and they're gonna air at least one, and probably more over a long period of time. So
sure.
Yeah, you're not going to escape Game of Thrones. If you think you could just fly under the radar, it's going to be here.
Well, what I'm hoping is after the final season airs and they release, you know, the box sets, you know?
Yeah.
And someone will just give it to me.
You said hit, you say to us.
I'll watch it. Yeah.
So I've got a bit of a spiel to pitch the show to you, and I can't decide if I should just go on for 7 minutes or kind of get pieces in here and there. But here's one thought I definitely want to get out now: is that even if you watch Game of Thrones and don't especially like it, I still think you should watch it. It's just this piece of culture. I can imagine someone not liking Star Wars, but you still should see it. You just can't like it. Even if you haven't seen it, you still know what a lightsaber is and who Darth Vader is. It's just...
Well, yeah, but I mean, you could say that about anything. I could say that about, hey, did you watch Different Strokes? It was an important comedy show in the 80s.
What you talking about, Todd?
Well, let's just say you made a list.
Is it relevant now?
Right.
Yeah.
Let's say you made a list
special
of...
episode where Gary Colin's character's friend might have been molested is very important.
Conrad Bain is a venerated actor.
It is
Good
true
old
that you
Conrad
can say
Bain.
that about a lot of shows. But as Shea points out, some of them become less relevant as time passes. This is hot right now. And two, if you're going to make a list, if you're going to like go down the list of culturally relevant pieces of art or literature or whatever.
Yeah, but it depends on if you're counting books and
Different
movies
Strokes
and
is
TV
pretty
shows.
far down. I don't even know if it makes the top 100, but Game of Thrones is probably top 10.
What you talking about, Sean?
Now you're just being offensive.
I see what you're saying. I do feel like I'm left out of the water cooler conversation.
Yeah.
You know, because everywhere I go, people are talking about Game of Thrones. So we were at the premiere screening of You're the Worst. It's like a party thing.
Mm-hmm.
And a number of people were talking about Game of Thrones. And one of the guys on the show said, hey, you know, Todd, just start watching this season. You don't have to watch any of the seasons before. And I was like, really? And he's like, he's like, it's just the prettiest show. That's what he was saying. It's really gorgeous and worth watching for the cinematography alone.
It is often compared to movies in the way that it's made because of the high budget and the attention to cinematography and all the incredible locations that they use. I mean, it's
Set
shot
design,
in Spain,
costumes.
Iceland, and Madagascar. Didn't they do Madagascar or something like that? Croatia, and all these just exotic locations with real castles and real amazing geographical features. So, definitely, it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
I mean,
It's got good
Is it
production
gonna-
value. Yeah.
is it going to beat what I saw in Highlander with Christopher Lambert and Sean Connery?
Well,
Because there are a lot of castles in that, and then New York skyscrapers. I got everything in that movie.
but see, there could be only one, and in Game of Thrones, there's lots.
Oh, I see.
There's no lightning when someone's head is cut off either.
But if there can be plenty of people, then why do they fight?
Well,
They have to.
you have to tune in to find that out. Yeah.
God damn it.
Yeah, you gotta find out.
Gotcha.
So I will say, let me get some of my thoughts out, because I feel like I watched like a couple hours. You know, I watched one after another of your 10-ish minute reviews of different movies, which by the way, pretty much you guys kept picking like the action movie of the week. And every
Sure.
time you didn't like it. And like, but they keep they go back every week and watch another one, and every time they don't like it. Like
I loved y'all's
So
comments
every
on.
now-
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I loved
was just
y'all's
gonna
comments
say,
on Fast and the Furious. You said it's first of all, it's a movie about family. That was so funny. That got me good.
Well, you know, we do, because every now and then you get a Fast and the Furious or a Crank. You know, or the last Rambo movie. I don't know if you saw that.
No,
But Steve Falk said, as we watched it together, he said, "You look like a 12-year-old boy. You were just perched on the edge of your seat, just happily watching this horrible carnage." And that, you know, that's what I go for, the like shock value, blow my mind, terrify me.
I do recognize that there's like a slice of the population that wants cool action, and that's often going to include violence and car chase scenes and fist fights and all that other stuff.
And The Rock.
And usually the movies that have these things aren't good movies. They're just not. They get some stars and some explosions, and they make a commercial and they make $100 million, and they don't have to be particularly artistic or whatever, you know. But sometimes you get both. Sometimes you get a movie with a lot of great action and also some good performances and et cetera, et cetera. And so one, I wanted to point out that I think I got a pretty good idea of what it is you're looking for. But also I want to point out that a lot of times how you feel about something is based on your expectations. And so I am worried that if you go into the first season of Game of Thrones excited about fights and dragons and medieval war, it's not going to happen. it's going to be a drama. It's going to be like some character development, and they're like laying down a groundwork for some long-term mysteries that will develop.
There will also be a lot of what they call sexposition, which is a lot of nudity and sex, but couched in revealing plot stuff. So there'll be a lot of nudity.
There's more. Basically, there's kind of a pattern. Like early on, there was a lot of sexposition, and then that started to kind of peter off. Peter off. See what I did there? And
it's because of it means penis.
Oh, yeah. See, that's not what I was
saying. It's becoming flaccid.
When you see it, penis off might become more meaniful to you.
Actually, it's relevant because the character we're talking about, his name is Peter. Too.
Yeah, it's true.
There's a lot of
extra funny. But
you will get so
layers.
many more joke opportunities once you've seen Game of Thrones. Just so you know, so many references you're missing. But anyway, as far as expectations go, I think that Game of Thrones hits on all the bases, but it's like some seasons do it different than others. I think that if you want a serious drama with great character development and subtlety and nuance and grandeur, filmmaking expertise and cinematography, it's going to have all that. But also, if you want some hot chicks with their tops off and you want some dragons burning people alive and you want to see some swords smashing some hammers, you're going to get all that. But you're going to get some of it in some episodes and other of it in episodes. And so I think you should be ready for the beginning to lay down this groundwork, to set up this world. Now, having said all of that, I do think halfway through the first episode, you're like, God, they got me watching this boring show. Which, some people will think that, and I think you will be one of those people. But I also think by the end of the episode, you're like, whoa, I didn't know it was going to be that kind of show. I think you'll be hooked in by the end of the first episode, and by the end of the first season, you'll be like, you might even be craving some more drama. You'll be wanting to ask questions about what characters were doing or thinking or what had happened in the past. And you'll slowly get to the answers to those. And as it goes, they've got a lot of the groundwork, world building, character development out of the way. And B, they've got this much bigger audience, which includes a greater number of people like you who just want to see some badassness. Well, that's what it starts to be more of toward the end. You start to get more action scenes, more action episodes as you're reaching climaxes from storylines and histories that are developed to climactic moments. The later seasons have more excitement, and the earlier seasons have more development. And so I'm hoping just having that expectation will keep you drawn more into the show.
That's good to know. I mean, I guess like one of my things, it drives me nuts in whatever genre of filmmaking. I mean, except, drama, if we're calling that a genre. But any kind of thing that's specialized, like a comedy, action, horror, when people call it a slow burn and they say it's a slow burn because there's character development. Mm-hmm. And the character development is people just yammering at each other. That's when I get bored, because like a good action movie and a good horror movie, the characters are developed through the action. Mm-hmm. So whatever the horrific element or the actiony element, it's there from the beginning, and you learn about the characters through them going through whatever weird.
A few things about it. Game of Thrones definitely has a bit of a horror element to it, in that it has these otherworldly beings that are coming for everyone. It seems
we'll call them zombies.
Yeah, we'll call them zombies, basically.
It's basically an ancient, ancient
zombies.
Evil that has arisen again after a long time.
And so
is it is zombies or like an Evil Dead situation?
Both.
It's got that element.
It's got the basically there's these undead, like sort of long living ice creatures that can raise the dead. That can create this thing called white. So those are like zombies, and the other things are kind of like ice zombies.
Yeah. I think we can all agree at this stage in our national history that whites suck.
Oh goodness, we do get plenty of options to make jokes like that.
Definitely.
In this case, white is spelled W-I-G-H-T, but of course we all make
Yes.
white power, white this and that jokes. Yeah.
Yeah.
The jokes just make themselves. Now, here's something I wanted to bring up that I think you're, as a part of a show that's been on for several seasons, what you can do in season 4 of a show that you can't do in season 1 of a show is have callbacks to earlier seasons.
True.
And that's happening a lot now in You're the Worst, because you guys have built up, several seasons worth of material, and you have running jokes that have been going for a while, and that anyone who's attentive will be like, oh yeah, I remember that. That's hilarious. Or like referring to I'm totally spacing out on an example right now. What's an example of a...
Edgar, some screw
Getting
up he
cut
did
off.
in Iraq.
Yeah, getting cut off, yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's a good example. And Game of Thrones has been around. This is now, it just finished its 7th season. So it had, not only does it have that same thing of being able to refer back to things that happened in earlier seasons, but it also has a lot of the original cast were actual kids when the show started.
Mm-hmm.
So they're actually growing up. You have actors that were 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 to 18 that are now...
So you're saying this is like Boyhood, but even longer.
Yeah.
Yes.
It is, honestly.
But it's not all that, right?
Yeah.
That's just part of it, because it's got such a giant cast.
One reason I'll also point out for the slow burn, if you will, one reason it takes a while to develop the characters and the drama of the show is because it's so spread out. And it honestly might even be helpful, I was going to say when you decide to go ahead and start watching it, to maybe get an outline, to have some character names in your mind, just so you can absorb everything that's happening, because there's so many
Sean's
characters.
Sean's going to draw you some sort of chart or something, I guess.
Yeah. But like generally what's going on is you have... We see in the opening episode, the opening scene of the first episode, we see these zombie creatures. They're real, But everyone else in the world, in this Game of Thrones world, they're legends, they're myths, they're stories from the past. But we know, we saw it right off the bat, So we also see this girl who's been exiled. There's a whole backstory to that, but she's been exiled with her brother. That's where the dragons come eventually.
Young, hot dragon.
I wouldn't want to spoil it, but you just know at this point, society,
Right.
And so we know that there is this threat of dragons and this threat of zombies, but those things haven't developed yet, right? And in the meantime, we're seeing all this politicking for power, for who's going to sit on the throne, right? That Game of Thrones, right? But that's kind of a theme of the show, is that all this squabbling and backstabbing to get power, they're all just worried about the wrong thing. You know what I mean? There's going to be zombies and dragons coming, and they're all kind of worried
they're fighting over politics. It's
so,
very much an allegory to the modern world as well, especially because these ice zombies are a lot of times seen as as an analogy for climate change, where everybody's fighting over politics. Meanwhile, nature is going to come destroy everything, because people aren't doing what they need to do.
And I know that you want politics in your action.
I don't mind some politics in my action. I'm not afraid.
All right. Okay, we got 2 super chats I got to address. One from Corky94, who asks us, what TV show would be Joffrey's favorite? To fill you in, Joffrey is a particularly sadistic, awful, crazy kind of guy in the show, a teenager who has too much power. I'm gonna say he would be into like American Horror Story or something like that.
Yeah, it makes sense.
He would like Spartacus.
He would like Game of Thrones.
He would like Spartacus. Yeah, he would like Game of Thrones. Those are our answers, basically. Obviously, Todd can't answer this, but
no, not really.
You would love to hate Joffrey.
Yeah, you would hate Joffrey.
You would hate him. You would enjoy hating him. I think you would.
Okay.
So we got another.
He's a spoiled brat.
Spoiled
brat. Who...
very rich, entitled, and cruel and sadistic. Easy to hate.
Yeah, he makes some jokes sometimes.
Most of the characters in Game of Thrones are very gray. That's one thing that makes it interesting, is that there aren't good guys and bad guys. Some people like certain characters more than others, but they don't say that these guys are better than others necessarily. They just prefer them. There are some characters who are kind of unambiguously bad guys, and Joffrey is one of those rare examples of that. Because just kind of like in real life, like name a real life human being that has never done something that you would disagree with, even if they're a great person. It's trying to portray human beings more accurately, even though it's set in this very unrealistic setting. But it's about those characters. People are still pieces
of shit, and so it still has some pretty evil people. Even Joffrey, he's misunderstood in some ways. He's awful, but he is. He has a bad family life, I guess. That's just, I don't know. I'm making excuses for him now, but he's pretty bad. We got another super chat from Steven Stark, who says, Game of Thrones isn't one story, it's 15 interwoven stories with flawed gray characters covering a vast world. It also subverts so many classic tropes, and that's true.
Well said, Steven. That's true.
What are the classic tropes it subverts?
I would say
a lot of them.
Yeah. I would say
it certainly subverts the good guy bad guy trope. Like I just said, like that was an example there.
Yeah.
There aren't just good guys and bad guys. Another one is that
there's a dwarf character who subverts that a bit.
There's a major subversion of doing the right thing is easy. You know, that's so often in movies and TV show, doing the right thing is portrayed as also the easier choice. And in Game of Thrones, it hammers the point home that doing the right thing has a big cost sometimes. Like fighting for peace, there's often a huge cost for peace.
Yeah.
And often,
I would say the other thing
like
is that a lot of time, I mean, it's kind of a well-worn thing that Game of Thrones kills off its main characters. I'm sure you've known about that, but the good guys just don't always win. It doesn't always work out.
Killing off main characters was one of the major chances it took.
Right.
main characters.
Main
that guy's
character.
dead
When you
now.
start
Holy
watching
crap.
a show, whoever
Well,
you think the good guy is, whoever you think the main character is, whoever you're
By
rooting
the end
for,
of the show, it'll
they're
be
not
different.
safe.
It'll
No
be different.
character
Yeah.
is safe.
There is no
character
main
you thought was
character
bad
either.
will be good. You'll think of them as a good character potentially by the end, or at least a more gray character.
Yeah.
So I think I'd say that is the main way that they do it. The end that they show, like, here's an example is, like, you might see this shining, this is from our chat, I won't say exactly what she said, but from Monica Yama, she says, you see this, like, white knight in shining armor, like, what you think would be a good character, but he actually is doing some awful, awful dark things. And
But
Right.
sometimes he does do good things. I mean, it's
you
like,
know, so
yeah.
it definitely is, instead of
Yeah.
people being more so
Another-
one-dimensional, they're...
Another theme of the show is torn loyalties. You know what I mean? Like, the king tells you to do one thing, the queen told you to do something else. Which person are you supposed to follow? And sometimes both things might be evil or against your personal code or against your family or your country or whatever. And so oftentimes characters having to, like, figure out somewhere between what they believe or what they're most likely to get punished for. You know, some knight in shining armor still sometimes.
I feel like
you know.
I would relate to that as an actor, because sometimes the director tells you to do one thing and then the producer tells you to do something else.
Oh.
And you got the writer not even there.
Well,
Yeah, exactly. So,
well, let me as a question I wanted to ask you, relating to all of this and relating to that somewhat indirectly, is that you've avoided Game of Thrones, but as you said, you know, at the party for You're the Worst, people were talking about it. What from our perspective, which is very, very biased and in a bubble, we obviously deal with Game of Thrones constantly. How large does it loom, you know, like in Hollywood? Obviously, there's just so many projects that we don't even ever hear of, that never see the light of day. So there's just so much going on that we're not privy to. So I just want to get your take on how big Game of Thrones is, you know, from your perspective, because to us, obviously, it's, you know, one of the biggest things there is, but that isn't how everyone sees it.
well, you know, I think obviously it's got a lot of cachet. HBO, just in general, people kind of revere in this town and elsewhere. I'm not always when I first started subscribing to HBO, there was a lot of stuff there for me, but it's become less and less. This stuff that's for me. I find more stuff. This is going to sound so lame because I'm on a show on FXX, but I find more stuff that's for me currently on FX.
We do too.
We do too.
It's the best channel. It's
It's the
got all
best
the best
channel.
shows.
We've said that,
We all
yeah.
agree that it is.
We've
It
said that
is.
on our show before.
I mean, I could list off a bunch of shows on FX, and I would still miss shows that I love somehow.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and I don't watch everything on FX. Even that, it's like something has to. The weird thing about Game of Thrones for me is there's a lot of elements that I was attracted to, but I also didn't want to be disappointed again. You know.
Yeah.
By something, and I was honestly also comparing it to Spartacus, which I loved. Like I watched the whole series a couple times.
How long? How many
because
seasons did that run?
Spartacus?
4?
Yeah.
5?
Four?
More?
3.5.
3.5. Okay.
Because the first season where Andy Whitfield played Spartacus, and then he got cancer.
Yeah, brain cancer. Yeah.
And while they were waiting to see what happened, they shot a prequel, which was just 6 episodes
Was that the
instead
Blood
of
and
12.
Sand thing?
Yeah, Blood and Sand,
okay.
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, and then they did 2 more seasons with a different actor playing Spartacus.
I can tell you, I've actually seen a lot of like scenes, but without dialogue from Spartacus, and this is pretty weird, but fans of Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire, the book series, they like to fan cast what characters will look like. and make like gift sets or videos or things like that. And Spartacus is very popular for fan casting characters for Game of Thrones. So I've seen a bunch of stuff from it, but completely out of context and with no idea about who the characters are.
Right. Okay.
But I've seen a lot, and I think it looks nice. I mean, I like that kind of aesthetic that it has. It's kind of a barren, the arenas and stuff like that. I don't know. I like that aesthetic a bit.
Spartan.
Yeah.
Spartan.
Well, but also the thing about Spartacus that I think is very different than Game of Thrones is it's got Sam Raimi written all over it. You know,
there's where the camp comes from.
Yeah, you got Lucy Lawless in there. She's just wonderful.
Yeah.
I don't know if you watch Ash versus Evil Dead.
No, we don't.
That's another show that I watch. But like Raimi, he did Xena Warrior Princess, which that was like a campy, you know, Saturday afternoon thing.
The kind of stuff
this
you love.
was
highly entertaining.
Yeah, I liked Xena. It was fun.
Yeah.
I like camp. I do. But this was, you know, kind of a marriage of that cheese and a harder hitting thing, and I just like that about it. And the visuals are way more over the top. They're very, you know, you can see the Evil Dead in them. The like splatters of blood, but it's very cartoony across, you know.
Yeah.
And Game of Thrones seems more visually like a Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings movie.
Yeah, that is probably
it. And again, kind of like the story presentation, I think the style presentation shifts through the seasons too. That they get a bigger budget, and I mean, in this last season, it's obvious. I don't want to give too much away, but it's across the board. People have commented on the distinct change in style of what everyone's wearing in the show, and I think that stylish and flashy are like very similar words, and I think flashy has a little bit more negative of a connotation, but whichever word you want to use, I think as Game of Thrones progresses, it gets more stylish, you know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to mention my angle to convince you. So before we did this episode, I asked what shows you were watching. You said Claws is my favorite. Use that word, my favorite, right now.
It really is my favorite.
So I had already been a little interested. Claws is a show on TNT with Niecy Nash, which is about the extent of what I knew about it. Was that it had Niecy Nash from like Reno.
The fact that she didn't walk away with an Emmy, like all of the Emmys, they should have given her all the Emmys.
Even for
Amazing
set design, just
give her all the trophies.
Is she the central character?
She's the central character, okay. And so that was the extent of what I knew about it. It was about a nail salon. I knew that it had an aesthetic that really appealed to me, like candy colored, bright, like colorful things. I love colorful things. I like it when shows don't shy away from that sort of thing. So that was already a selling point. I knew a couple people who'd watched it, and it has a mostly female cast, and anyone who listens to the show knows that I'm into that. So I was down as soon as you said it's your favorite. I was surprised. Don't get me wrong. I was definitely surprised when you said it was your favorite. It intrigued me. So I watched the first 5 episodes out of 10. And I wanted to bring up what similarities I think it shares with Game of Thrones. I don't know why you like Claws.
Let me cut you off real quick.
Okay,
I just want to point out, I did watch the first episode, and I was really impressed. It was really good. I'm sure Shay's got a lot more to say, having seen more and thought about it more. But I thought the first episode was, I thought it was going to be this sort of comedic story about these girls chicken heading about their man, you know, but it's more of a crime drama. It's kind of a serious, it's got some humorous parts and some colorful moments, but it's like a crime drama with a bunch of female leads instead of a bunch of male leads. It was very different than what I thought it was going to be, and very good.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's why I got sort of sucked into it so fast, but also, I mean, I imagine to compare it to Game of Thrones, it took me into a world that I wouldn't have considered. It's a little bit more reality based, obviously, than Game of Thrones. Maybe.
It gets a little out there.
I don't know. A character named Uncle Daddy is very unrealistic.
It's crazy. I don't know. I don't spend a lot of time in Florida, but I wouldn't put it past.
No, I agree. I
if
think
there's someone named Uncle Daddy, they're in Florida.
And by the way, this character I'm referring to is Dean Norris
who is Hank Schrader from Breaking Bad, which is what I was going to get to next. Just as an aside about my appreciation, I liked that it had Dean Norris from Breaking Bad, and it had Judy Reyes from Scrubs, who was Carla Espinosa in Scrubs, one of the main female characters, and I liked that show a lot. So I didn't know she was in it though, so that was a really pleasant surprise for me. So I liked that. But as for what I actually liked about the show itself, besides the characters in it or the actors in it, is that it has a lot of fierce and gorgeous women in like some insane outfits. Like the costuming and the wardrobe is crazy, and they're hot as hell. I mean, they just are. They're really hot. So there's that. Game of Thrones has that for sure. It's got the sex appeal angle. It's got women, plotting, and powerful women, fierce women. So it's got that. Claws has a lot of plots and schemes and like plot twists and turns and things like that I would be like, at the end of the episode I was like, oh fuck, what happened here? I can't believe this. Game of Thrones definitely has that covered. Claws has sex and violence, though less, explicit sex or violence than Game of Thrones. But it does have that as well. And I think they both had some really great imagery, like in very different ways. And that, Claws is very colorful, but it has great cinematography. And that's one of the things I appreciated about it a lot. I don't know. This is just me guessing what you might have liked about it. The crime drama element maybe as well. I'm not sure. There's there's no drugs in it.
Also, you said that, what's her name? That's the lead actress?
Niecy Nash.
Niecy Nash, you said that she deserved to win a lot of Emmys. Well, Game of Thrones has some extremely talented actors and actresses that have been with the show for either short periods of time or long periods of time. You've got one episode with Ian McShane. Meanwhile, you've got 7 seasons of Lena Headey and Peter Dinklage, and they're just both. They've won a lot of. They have won Emmys, and they I think they're pretty widely deserved. And this is something that a lot of our listeners will understand, and you will maybe understand on more of a not a distinct level, but you'll get the point here, which is that. Shay and I and most of the people who follow our podcast have read the books, and we came to the books first. And we came to the books first. I read the books back in 2001, long before the TV show even existed. And so there's always this kind of back and forth on, why did they change this? Why did they change that? I see them as two separate entities. They're very different mediums. And so that's the thing, right? But it's really common that some of the book purists, which there are a lot of in our fandom, that will say, this is bad, it's not nearly as good as the books. But even the most, negative takes on Game of Thrones from people who have read the books will still praise the acting. That's one of the things that is always great about the show. Even when the story falters or when some things just don't make sense or it's just not your bag, the acting is always amazing. So that's a great thing.
And would you say the accent work is on point?
Yeah, they definitely make a point of having people in different regions of the show have different accents, like a strong northern accent versus more of a a capital accent. So they definitely do that, yeah.
They cast a lot of people. Areas.
They're all, Irish, British, or Scottish, or something like that, except for Peter Dinklage, who is one of the main characters.
There's a few others, like Danish actors in here and there, but
Danish,
mostly.
you're right,
they also have a lot of Texans and people from Boston.
Okay,
that's another trope they broke.
Are they just Boston accents? I suppose.
Hey, let's go out.
That would be so.
There's a dragon with a Boston accent, actually.
Yeah, just one of them. It's kind of weird that only one.
Always wears a Patriots hat. It's really weird.
You're just joking, right? The dragons don't talk.
Correct.
No.
Yeah, they don't talk.
Okay, because I can't hassle with.
The dragons
no talking.
don't talk.
Fire only. Fire and roaring. That's it. That's all.
They speak to me.
Roaring. Yeah, even if Benedict Cumberbatch is doing the voice, I'm like, come on.
There are people who sound a little bit like him, but no one with a name like his.
I don't know why that bothers me. It's a dragon. It's not real. Why can't it talk? But I don't know.
We all have a line somewhere, and I agree with you. I do. There's one tiny thing in Game of Thrones that is like, there's so many fantastical things that are happening. I don't know why it bothers me, but Daenerys eventually, the main character who has dragons, eventually rides her dragon, right? and she doesn't have like a saddle or anything to like strap her in. And like it just really bothers me on this level that I feel like it shouldn't bother me because it's a dragon and like it's just crazy.
Just flying around, just holding on.
But I really can't picture her just holding on to these like horns.
Was she the only one who rides dragons, or are there other
You'll have
people
to watch
who
to
ride
find
dragons?
out.
Well, I'm just asking about
I'll
the
tell you.
saddle.
Well, see, the
No one
dragon.
has a saddle.
No one has a saddle. No one has a saddle in the show.
Except for their horses.
There are some. There's certain.
I'll say she has 3 dragons. She can only ride one dragon at a time, so you would think that the show wants to find 2 more people to ride these dragons. So that's an element of the show.
And there have been little hints and clues. Like, we're hesitant to even say too much because that's something through the course of the show you're thinking about, seeing how it might go. So
yeah, you might be wondering who's going to ride these 2 dragons.
Who's going to ride the other 2 dragons, and will they ever create a dragon saddle?
These are the burning questions.
Burning questions.
They figured it out for the horses. Why not for the dragons?
Yeah, that's how I feel. I think I'm pretty unreasonable here, but I feel you about talking. I wouldn't like it if they talked either. If she could communicate even telepathically or anything, I wouldn't like that.
Let me take care of this real quick here. Let's take a quick short break while we do we've got an ad to do here.
A mid-roll.
A mid-roll ad.
As Vernon would say, we got to pay the bills.
Yes, that's right. As Vernon would say, we got to pay the bills.
Pay the bills.
So we have, Sean and I are wearing studio headphones here, which I'm very much liking. I'm going to take them off for a second. You can see it's got this great design here that I really appreciate the way it folds here. And this little mechanism here that makes it really smooth to adjust on my head, which I really like that. These are good quality. And we have a discount code available. They're Studio. They're a Swedish company, and this is
SUDIO.
Yes, SUDIO. And the discount code is Westeros, and you get 15% off any purchase if you are able to buy them. And for the month of October, which of course this is well timed for, this is the last day of September, we have, they are doing today's the 29th, isn't it? Okay, second to last day of the month. They are giving 10% of their proceeds to Pink Ribbon Foundation, which is a breast cancer charity, part of the International Breast Cancer Charity Network. And that, I'm very happy with these headphones. I've only had them for about 5 or 6 days.
I have one thing to say, though. If you get the headphones, they're studio headphones, you have to listen to Susu Studio. The first thing is it's just a rule.
That's right. That's our rule, not their
Sure.
rule. But still, it's a rule.
As soon as you said that, all I could think about was that song.
Yeah. So I've been using these nonstop for about 5 or 6 days, walking
Fair
around
enough.
listening to podcasts, walking around doing my chores.
Nonstop, huh? While you slept?
I slept in them. Yeah, I took a shower with
Yeah.
them. No, I'm just kidding. I did not. They're not waterproof, as far as I know. But they're also very, they're firm, but they don't press too hard. That's one thing that a lot of these headphones, they kind of like, if you wear them too long, they kind of hurt. These are firm, but they don't hurt after a while, which I really like that too. I could have jogged in these easily and they wouldn't have come off. So
I usually have, I think I have a small head, and headphones are often like a little too big for my head.
I can confirm
And
that
they're
you have a small head.
But these are comfortable. These
Hold on a
are
second.
adjustable enough to fit me just
Hold
right.
on a second. Our video output was low for a moment. We just got to take a second for it to be back.
All right.
Anyways, I was just hoping it would be quick. See, it says that video output low, and people in the chat said should be back any second.
Good old internet.
Yeah, it happens. It's weird because it says it's fine. I don't know.
Okay.
Hopefully it's back now. Is it? Let's see. Yeah, I think it's back.
Okay, well, let's take care of these super chats that we had.
Yeah,
and
let's do that.
Get back to it.
Okay. Super chats. We got one from Acre Frey. Some characters you hate early on, you may love later. Some characters do evil things in service of what they think is the greater good. Duty versus love. And then in quotes, the human heart in conflict with itself, which is something we were talking about earlier as a selling point of the show. Very well said. That really is what the show's about, honestly.
Yeah, looks like we did lose connection for a second. Everybody's back. All the people saying we're back.
Bad.
Yep. All right.
Yeah, it's too bad. But it happens. Anyways, another super chat from Alexander Wilson, who asks us, how do you feel that we will get an actual definite ending to Game of Thrones? Well, I was never worried about that, so I feel about the same.
I feel the same. I think we're getting a definitive ending. I think that one of the things about the series is that the books, Todd, this is maybe something that a point of trivia. The books haven't been completed, and the show has passed the book material, so they've had to.
I don't know if you knew that.
They've had to work without some of the source material.
You did, okay.
So,
and how do you feel they've done?
Well, not bad. It's sometimes they've done quite poorly, but sometimes they've done quite well. As one of our earlier commenters said, there's about 15 or more storylines going in at any given time. So that's one thing that the show has that's really great, because maybe you don't like one of the storylines. Maybe you don't like 5 of the storylines, but maybe you do like the other 10. So you get a lot of, that's part of why it generates so much talk, is that some people really focus on certain things and really like those things, whereas so you can kind of get past the things you don't like because they're so separate from some of these other very distinct plot lines that barely touch each other.
Yeah.
And, maybe you really like one actor's performance in this one scene, whereas, it doesn't
but
work
also,
well.
in terms of the books, in terms of the show outpacing the books, there's tons of things in the books that aren't in the show, and there's tons of things that the show is going to wrap up differently than the books will. So it's really just like getting an alternate story, an alternate version of it all, I think, and so I'm fine with it. It's not gonna, the things it'll spoil, that's not the point of it. The point of it is the journey. It isn't some plot point, and the things it won't spoil are like a myriad. There are so many things that are in the book, so many plot lines, characters, large things that are not in the show, which is to say, my other point is, in terms of convincing you, if by any chance you like to read books, there's an awesome book series that we hear it's based on. I don't know if you like to read books, and this is a pretty long book. Even Sean here is only partway through the second book of the series.
Okay.
So
meanwhile, I've read them a lot. 10 times each.
He doesn't read.
I do read books, but very rarely fantasy. I read very few novels these days.
Nonfiction stuff, then?
I'm mostly a nonfiction guy.
Cool.
But I'm told that's average for old white fiction.
Are you reading nonfiction about old white dudes too?
Sure, I'll read nonfiction about old white dudes, old white ladies, old black dudes.
What's hot in the old white dude fiction section these days?
Yeah.
What's
the top seller in the? When I go to the bookstore, I don't see that section.
The nonfiction book that I've been working through is a book by Vern, not Vern from You're the Worst. This Vern, the writer from Ain't It Cool News, wrote a book called Segology, and it's a breakdown of all of Steven Seagal's films.
That's amazing.
The late 80s to the present, and I can't recommend it more, even if you don't know that much about Steven Seagal. His passion for these movies and the way they've devolved into total garbage, and he will find the positive silver lining of any piece of junk Seagal has done, and it's so much fun to read. I can't recommend it more.
Seagal,
but then
all right.
I did pick up a fiction book, and it was this book because I read about a movie about a giant shark that they're making with Jason Statham called Meg. And I was like,
Meg?
what the
Meg?
hell? Yeah, it's called Meg.
And it's
That's
a giant
the
shark,
right?
It's a megalodon. It's a prehistoric.
Okay.
I get it.
Meg for short.
I was just thinking of the female.
I
name
see what they
thing.
did there.
Yeah, they tricked you.
They did. They tricked us good.
But so I was like, I gotta wait till next summer to see that movie. Fuck that! I'm gonna read the book. So I'm reading that book. It's amusing. It's kind of dumb, but it's fun. But obviously, you guys know I like dumb, fun stuff. So there you go.
Yes, I guess we've talked about camp a few times. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's another thing that it kind of scares me about diving into Game of Thrones, is I'm concerned it'll have a level of pretentiousness that I won't care for. Is that true at all?
I think that came along with the increased stylization as it went on. I think it became a little easier to make fun of it for being pretentious in the later seasons than the earlier seasons.
Okay.
I try to be objective. You know what I mean? I know there are some certain plot lines that I didn't like, and I know I'm not alone. A lot of other people didn't like them also. And I know that the in the same way I pointed out that I know that there's a slice of the population like you who like cool actiony kind of stuff. There's another slice of the population who likes to mock, highbrow stuff. And
Sure.
Game of Thrones has both. It's got highbrow stuff that you can mock for being pretentious, and it's got some cool action fights. It's really such a spread out thing. Like we were saying, also it has so many different characters and storylines that it's really easy to be angry at the show and to love the show at the same time. It does so much in so many different ways. So.
Which brings me,
Sure.
I'll say this super chat we got, I didn't read before this, from Corky94. Out of the 67 existing Game of Thrones episodes, there are very few episodes where dragons or zombies have played a significant part. The series is far closer to The Godfather, politics and scheming. I'd say that's true, although I'd say the dragons and zombie stuff is pretty spectacular. That it can overshadow the other stuff. You might have one episode with a dragon battle in a season, or the dragons in action, but that moment was huge and had
it just cost so much to film those moments.
And the Godfather
They also have wolves, by the way, like giant
wolves. Yeah.
I don't know if that's
the Godfather is like lauded,
Just wolves,
what I mean?
like the gray, like in the gray.
Dire wolves.
big.
They're
They're
big, like
which is actually a real
wolves.
thing, but
It's a
they're
real
extinct.
Yeah.
Can you bottle fight them? Like,
If you dare.
There's a
I saw that movie,
Universe
The Gray, by
reference.
the way. That movie was awesome. That's a super underrated
I
movie.
loved it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great. And I got to work with. I did a guest star on a show with Dermot Mulroney. So I was picking his brain about being out in the cold for all that time.
That movie is
It was
bleak.
pretty cool.
Bleak. Yeah. Wow.
Well, but if you stay for the post-credit stinger, I don't know. There's there's something in that.
There was something.
Did you?
I didn't know. I didn't know there was an after scene.
All right. Can I spoil it, or should I
Sure.
not?
Yeah. If you don't want to be
All it
spoiled
is,
on the gray, then sorry, folks.
Yeah. So after the credits, there's a moment, and you see the wolf, right? And he's breathing, and Liam Neeson is lying. You just see the back of his head, like lying. Ostensibly, he's been killed by the wolf, but then the wolf has like a death rattle, and the wolf dies.
So they both die.
So it's a tie, you guys.
No, nobody wins. It's got a very gray ending. Oh,
Yeah. There you go. There you go.
I see what I did there.
Right. Let's.
I'm sorry. What you go ahead?
I was gonna say about The Godfather. While that movie is, every critic's got in their top 10 list, but I can also see how it's boring. You know what I mean? I can see both. But I think when people think back to The Godfather, there's probably a couple things that are in the forefront of your mind, like the big memories from The Godfather, or like the shootout of James Caan, right? And the horse head in the bed, like those big violent actiony moments. They stand out more when you've had this quote unquote boring drama to build up to these intense moments.
The only thing I would say about The Godfather, and having not seen Game of Thrones, maybe Game of Thrones has this tension throughout, but The Godfather, the characters are very volatile, and they're always in very volatile situations. So at no point in the movie are you thinking, in every scene, it feels like somebody could die.
Yes, I'd say that is exactly correct for Game of Thrones. That is kind of its shtick, to be honest, is that anyone can die, that you're worried for people are volatile. I would say that it's a little less true in this most recent season, in the last season, but I think it's gonna be just as true, more true than ever in the final season. Obviously, it's the final season.
Yeah.
But it happens a little less this last season, but I mean, throughout the previous first 5 seasons, really, characters you would not predict will die. So you'll be worried for everyone, especially because we just told you this.
One of the things that you mentioned Lord of the Rings earlier, and one of the things that George R. R. Martin is the author of Game of Thrones, and he's a big fan of Tolkien, but he criticized one crucial decision that Tolkien made when writing Lord of the Rings, which was that he thought it was a big mistake for Gandalf to come back. He thought once Gandalf was dead, he should have stayed dead, and they shouldn't have this people coming back thing, because it's the opposite of what you're talking about. If a character can just come back, then even when they do die, you're like, but they might come back. Maybe they're not dead, you know. But
I agree.
With permanent, when a character dies and stays dead, you know, and that's more gives you that sense of dread for any of your favorites. What Game of Thrones is a large enough cast that it's done all these things. It's had characters die and stay dead. It's had a couple of cases where someone seemingly died and came back. And I don't mean like through magical means. I just mean like, they weren't actually dead. And things like that. So that's what you can do with a giant cast. That's a flaw with a lot of shows is that when let's say there's like a whodunit type show.
Let's say Claus. Let's say Claus right here.
Right.
Niecy Nash is never gonna die. The main character, Desna, she's never gonna die. I mean, I don't want her to, but you're not ever worried about her. I'm not.
Or when you have like a whodunit situation and there's like there's only 10 characters on the whole show. You've only got 10 options for who the whodunit could have been, right? You can kind of narrow it down. It's too easy to figure out. But this show cast is too
huge
large.
Ensemble cast. That's the thing about it is that it's definitely one of the biggest ensembles on TV, which is good.
It might be. I think it might be the biggest.
I say one of because Orange is the New Black is a particularly big ensemble as well.
Fair.
But
that's actually a really good selling point. I'm glad you said that about Martin's thing about people staying dead, because that is something that drives me bananas about modern storytelling, especially cinematically, because of the all the superhero stuff, and superheroes are constantly dying and coming back to life, and to me that just removes stakes.
They have no tension.
Who cares? I mean, he'll be fine.
Not even Superman, the bad guys have tension. The bad guys don't even die. They just like lose and then recover somehow.
Put Arcane Asylum and then break out next movie.
Yeah, exactly.
None of us are big fans of superhero movies.
And to talk about and to reference to bring it back to Claus, because I'm obsessed with that show and I bring everything back to that show. But they did do that. And at first I was like, no, but then it was so bananas that I was like, okay, I can go with this. This is so bananas. So if you're gonna do it, it should be bananas.
One thing that bothers me about most of the big budget action movies is, you know, what we've been saying here is that the action doesn't have the same impact on me when I'm not worried about the characters. When I just know that there's like 3 minutes later, the car chase will be done and they're going to make a video game later and we're going to get back to the main character winning the girl and beating the bad guy. But when a main character dies, suddenly all of the action is more enticing. You know what I mean? When you're actually worried that a main character, a good guy or a central or even the main character will die, suddenly the action becomes more meaningful. And Game of Thrones definitely does that.
I remember the first time I saw. I'm sorry to interrupt. The first time I saw something like that was in this William Friedkin movie called To Live and Die in L.A. Did you ever see this movie?
I haven't.
I've heard of it, but haven't seen it.
Yeah. It's not the greatest movie. It's just like a cop thriller thing. But one of the main characters out of nowhere, 3/4 of the way into the movie, gets popped, and there's no within the action sequence. They don't stop. He's not lying on the ground, somebody holding him saying, hang on, or do you need me to tell something to your wife? Or, there's none of that. He just drops. And then it takes you a few minutes to realize, oh shit, this guy we've been hanging out with is not here anymore. What's happening? And it's so crazy. So I totally know what you mean when you're saying that stuff.
Someone in the chat said Claus is crazy good, and another person in the chat said that was a good movie. They liked that. Another person also brought up how the sex scene in the Claus pilot had them looking at what channel it was on.
It was pretty.
It's on TNT, which is like
a couple of sex scenes in
there. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, there's a sex scene like within the first 2 minutes. I believe, like pretty.
Yeah, you're right. It was very early.
Yeah.
Another thing I'll say in line with. We bounced around a bunch of topics. I was scared to bring this up at first, but for the sake of the podcast and for my own obsessiveness, I guess, taking notes on Game of Thrones. When I watch each episode, I'm taking notes. And I have, I kind of lay out all the characters on my page. And I'm not exaggerating. Through the seasons, they've introduced characters and some have been written off or killed or whatever, but I have like 50 names written down, and I'm not like writing down every character I can think of. I'm writing down every character who is playing a significant role, and I have like 50 names
So
written down in my paper.
It really is a huge cast.
Yeah. So it's
there's very little wasted acting time. Is what you're
there's
saying.
a little, but there's very little.
It depends on what you might call wasted, because there's a couple of moments that I particularly liked, but that some people complained about, where a couple characters were having a relatively mundane conversation, like telling each other a joke or talking about what kind of wine they like, and it wasn't particularly plot connected, but it was still, without giving too much away these characters, but it was demonstrating the difference in their class or their role, their relation to each other, stuff like that. So I actually kind of like to see the kind of day-to-day activities of characters, because it helps put in perspective. I just know that the dude on a horse with a sword going to fight in battle, I know he had to put that suit on, and he had someone helping him, and it's heavy, and he has to pee, and there's like, he's still a human, and it has to go through the motions of life. He's not just this knight on a sword, and I like to see the real person making their way day to day, not just the knight in the middle of the battle. I like to see the whole of the character.
Of course, yeah, that makes sense. I just don't like it when they spend too much time getting to the sword fighting. That's
another important comparison here is that dragons and wolves both have claws.
That's a good point.
I mean,
do they get them done in Florida? Are they like fancy?
Yeah, the dragons in Game of Thrones are known to swap out their nail tips in between episodes.
It could be
very, very fancy dragons.
All right, well, now I'm going to watch it, because the nails on claws are fantastic. I didn't even know I cared about fingernails until I watched that show.
Okay, I wanted to move on. We have a couple other sections we wanted to get to. I wanted to say my last selling point before I wanted to ask a little bit more about what shows you're watching. You can try to sell us on some other shows. I've got a few shows written down already that you mentioned, obviously Claws and Ash versus Evil Dead. But before I get to that, I wanted to say that my last selling point here is that if you watch Game of Thrones, you get to come back in like 3 months and tell us how wrong we were,
or how right,
or how right we were. Like, you could just do it just to stick it to us. Just say it.
Oh, that's a good selling point. I could just come back and be pissed.
Yeah, you could.
God damn, all of you.
And here's something that you probably won't get pissed about, but something I just saw someone in the chat say something that made me laugh. I couldn't even keep it in. I was laughing while she was talking. It was like, you guys are really avoiding the incest talk. There is a lot of incest in Game of Thrones.
There's a lot of incest. It's true.
So,
yeah, well,
if that's a selling point or not, but there is. It's a thing we should tell you.
He's like, ooh, incest? Why didn't you tell me sooner? Should have started with that.
I really liked Bates Motel, and that was all about sexual tension between a mom and her son, which made me feel creepy. I was like, why am I engaged in this?
But isn't that what every movie and TV show is about?
Yeah.
Secretly. They're mostly about that. Yeah. Mostly.
So, what other shows are you watching that came out in the last year or two that you would like to sell us on, or just tell us that you're watching?
Well, I mean, we just finished Orphan Black.
Oh, awesome! As Aziz and I watch Orphan Black, we have the final season to watch. We're actually a season behind.
I think
so don't spoil us.
Three, definitely the first two. I think I'll also sell the third season of it.
Yeah, I mean, mostly it's because of her. To be honest with you, she's so good. The first season,
amazing.
The first few episodes, I didn't even realize it was her in some of the parts.
Her mom. There's a story about like on set filming Orphan Black. Her mom was on set one day, and she was filming as one of the other characters, and her mom turned to someone else and says, When's Tatiana gonna get on set? It was her daughter on. It's totally believable because she really is amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, she's definitely giving a masterclass in acting, but it's also a fun show. I mean, the supporting characters are all really good. I will say, I kept watching it the whole time, and I enjoyed it the whole time. The last couple seasons can get hard to comprehend. What's going on.
That's what happened with us, and so we have. I guess we stopped on season 4, so we have the final 2 episodes of season 4, and then season 5, the final season to watch. And I'm already like, so much of this is not going to make sense to me. I'm not going to remember all of these ins and outs. I don't think I understood it in the first place. So
there's one of the actors in Orphan Black is Game of Thrones.
It's true.
Has a couple season run.
Sarah's scruffy boyfriend. husband, her nice
the very
boy
handsome
toy,
guy.
the handsome.
Oh, right on.
That
yeah.
guy, he's in it.
Michael, what's his real name? I forget.
Michiel Huisman.
Michiel Huisman. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways.
It's a hard
Right.
name to say.
It's too much. The names of actors have become too much. They're so hard to say.
So you got Orphan Black. So far, you named quite a few shows with a lot of female cast members with Claus and Orphan Black right there.
I guess
nice.
I like
You like
female
the ladies.
characters in the
I do
forefront,
too.
but I like stuff with dudes too. I really like the show Baskets.
Sean
I
loves
love
Baskets.
that show.
Baskets, yeah.
I can't believe how good that show is. I mean, I had high expectations because I knew Louis was behind it, but it was. So when I think about shows and what to watch, what I like, what I recommend, how I rate things, I kind of recognize there's this difference between things that are appealing to me and things that are generally good. Baskets is appealing to me. Someone just got in my brain and knew what I would like and made Baskets. It's so good, yeah.
I feel that way. I think a lot of people feel that way because it's definitely kind of a bananas and somewhat depressive
Yeah.
comedy show.
It's weird
But
how
I
it's
think
hilarious and depressing at the same time.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's kind of and it's like You're the Worst. It's the characters are for the most part unlikable or in some instances just pathetic. But I find it so funny. And another show I really like is People of Earth.
Oh, that's actually on my list. I've seen the first episode of that, and I just fell off. But I'm more likely to get to it now. I definitely was interested. I like it when they have sci-fi, fantasy comedies. It's just an interesting.
Yeah. It's a
Different.
good genre.
Who's in that? What channel is that on?
It's TBS, I believe.
Yeah, it's TBS. It's Wyatt Cenac. I hope I said that right.
Yeah.
Who used to be on the Daily Show.
Yeah.
He's sort of the head of an ensemble cast. A lot of
A
recognizable.
lot of comedians you would know for sure, Sean.
Yeah,
It's
great
about a
character
support
actors.
group for people who've been abducted by aliens.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
maybe the
I remember
aliens
hearing about
actually exist. Is the
Okay.
shit.
yeah,
that's
maybe
like
it's
the-
real, maybe it's
Yeah,
not.
maybe-
It's very
yeah.
funny, but it's unlike Baskets. I mean, the characters have a pathetic quality to them, but they're less. They're all very likable. It's a sweet show.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's got a sweet
Yeah.
core to
Are you-
it, and it's very dry and funny.
Are you watching The Good Place? Have you seen any of that?
No, I didn't do that because I have this just weird thing about God, I guess.
Yeah, I have that too. I'm very atheist. Both Aziz and I are, but it's just not about that.
Sean is
Tell
too.
me.
Oh yeah,
I
sorry.
would call myself agnostic, and
Yeah.
that's a whole debate to
But
itself.
the point
I would call
remains.
myself agnostic. Yeah,
But
more
the
than
point
anything.
remains that we're all of us are uncomfortable with that sort of thing. This is me saying, throw that out the window. It's a really good show. It's
Yeah.
not about heaven or hell
it's
or
not
anything.
religious at all. Yeah.
It's not religious at all.
God isn't really a part of it.
As they say in it, they like in one of the first episodes, they ask, well, what religion got it right, And they say, each religion maybe got 2% of it. The only person who really got it right was this stoner guy who did mushrooms in Iowa, and he just went off, whatever his name was, I forget what it was, and he just said like 97% of everything. just a stoner.
So it's very irreverent about it.
It's irreverent,
It's
yeah.
very
that's
it's not specific about anything. Yeah.
It's good. It's
a
definitely,
fictional
if you like fantasy, sci-fi in
afterlife.
your comedy, if you like a good heartwarming tone to it while also being a little off the wall, zany.
It's also pretty plot driven for a comedy too.
It's very plot driven, a lot of plot twists constantly. Like you'll finish the last episode of the first season and be like, "What?" It's like shocking. So there's all that, and I mean,
Yeah,
you can't go wrong.
I already know the twist.
Oh, you do.
so,
Don't say it.
yeah.
Don't say it because people don't.
No, I'm not.
No,
I'm not
obviously.
gonna,
But,
I'll watch it anyway.
But yeah, obviously,
I'm not-
if you like Mike
yeah.
Schur, if you like The Office or Parks and Rec or Brooklyn Nine, any of his shows, it's good. It's in line with that, and we're big fans of that kind of show. They're a little less risque than a lot of the comedies that we watch.
But
It's Always Sunny is a show I still watch and,
Oh, yeah.
and really enjoy.
Yeah,
we're
the
big
thing about
fans.
Lethal Weapon
Mhm.
Yeah, the thing about Lethal Weapon that I like is it's not serialized. It's such a throwback to 80s TV
It's like the
Really?
18.
and obviously 80s movies. Yeah, and the two leads are having fun with each other, and the show, it rides that line like the movies did of being, having a good sense of humor, and then all of a sudden getting very serious and dramatic. I don't know. I find it really entertaining, and it's got explosions. See?
Ooh. Explosions. Game of Thrones has explosions.
It does it does have explosions.
Sort of medieval.
It does.
That sounds good. I like explosions.
Let's take care of a few more comments here.
Yeah, we do. All right, from Tim Wills, super chat. He said, Todd, my pupils in China were so engrossed by Game of Thrones that they thought it was real Western medieval history. Okay. Westeros history, folks. I love going to Atlanta, but rarely get out of Kennesaw or Midtown. Where should I go?
Well, Midtown is probably the best part of town. That's my favorite part of town. But I also... What's that?
Go to Little Five Points.
Little Five Points, yes.
That's
exactly what I was going to say. Yeah,
right.
Little Five Points is really very artsy. Lots of different restaurants. Lots of culture there. There's a lot of like smaller art galleries and things like that. Yeah, it's a good place. A lot of venues, smaller music venues, kind of interesting
Local
bars
food
and restaurants.
Good spot. East Atlanta Village, EAV. Yeah.
All right. Second super chat from Steven Stark. Many from him, but this is our second one. Another selling point: the fantastic community. And I'd say this community includes our former president Barack Obama, who loves Game of Thrones.
That's right.
It's just a lot of people like Game of Thrones.
Sure.
There's lots of like rabid fans like us, but it's true as well that. It's a huge amount of people that are into it.
The pop culture references are everywhere. Saturday Night Live has done multiple Game of Thrones sketches. 30 Rock brought it up, not 30 Rock, but Parks and Rec brought it up multiple times.
Parks and Rec, 30 Rock, yeah, even your own show.
There's this one show, You're the Worst, that had a character dressed up like,
yeah.
Well, it's definitely a phenomenon. I would never argue that. People do love this show.
Yeah. No getting around that. That is true.
All right.
It was a comment that I wanted to make earlier. The community is a good way to put it. That I was going to ask, would you go back and not have watched Lost? Like, despite like the frustration or disappointment at the end, for me anyway, I still enjoyed week to week talking to all my friends and coworkers about it. And I still have all these characters and these moments and these images in my mind. I still went through all these emotions through the whole thing. And at the end, you're left with what's at the end. And if the end sucks, you're left thinking it sucks. But dude, it was like years and years of goodness, right? So I feel like Game of Thrones, you're just missing out on this whole thing. We could have had you on a guest like 10 times already. If you've been watching all along. I was missing out. I just got on Twitter right before this season started. And like suddenly, it's like 500 followers. All these people love Game of Thrones. We're all talking about it and making jokes and connecting on other levels. And it's just this whole community of people out there that are loving this on a bunch of different levels, whether it's for the explosions or the symbolism or the costume design.
Or the explosive symbolism.
Or the explosive costume design.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
You've definitely tempted me. Might dip my toes in.
We're about at the hour and a half mark, but there was one thing I wanted to end it with, which was I just wanted us to talk about our favorite Vernon moments.
Yes,
here.
We're gonna have to.
Okay.
We're gonna have to pump up your ego here a minute.
And I was putting images on the screen.
I'll accept that.
But personally, one of my favorite running jokes in the whole show is Vernon saying that I was born dead. And that he regrets being born dead. He goes so far as to say his parents never loved him because he was born dead. They never connected with him.
Yeah, so
it's just
take this portion not only as us, being very loving these moments in your show, but also for anyone who's watching who hasn't seen You're the Worst here yet. We're not just saying it because he's our guest. All three of us.
He's our guest because we love the show.
Season 1, first episode. We watch it when it airs. We don't watch it later on the DVR. We watch it when it airs. And
that's cool.
Yeah, we're like,
it's like appointment television. That's very old school.
Yes, most shows we don't do that with. We do that with Game of Thrones, of course, because we got to be on top of it. But most shows we just like DVR it, watch it when we get. But You're the Worst. We're ready every time.
Thank you. That's awesome.
So obviously the Born Dead stuff is a long running thing, but there's this. I think it's one of my favorite scenes in the whole show. Honestly, like the one that made me laugh the most is the scene where Vernon goes in to get money from Paul while he's on the toilet.
Paul
and it's this great bit of physical acting, of physical comedy. It just brings me to tears when I watch it.
And the reason he goes into the bathroom desperately trying to seek money is he is your character is a money slave. Is that the right term?
Yeah. This show is so incredibly written, and they find such bizarre stuff. But when I read that, I was like, "What the fuck does that mean?" I don't understand.
I don't. Half the people here don't. Yeah. So
and I looked it up, and it's really a thing, and it's not just a thing. It's people make money off of the fact that it exists. There's a whole. You go on Amazon, and there's erotica. That's just about money slaves and financial dominatrixes. It's bananas.
We need to explain this to people who haven't seen the show. Like his character is addicted to giving money to this woman online
across the world.
Yeah,
like in whatever Russia or wherever
just you've been naughty. Give me $10,000 right now, or I'll blah 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 blah. And he just enjoys. It's like, okay, here you go, $10,000. Yeah, and he's just like addicted to giving her money. It's just crazy. And his wife is like, "What are you doing?" And he's hiding it from her, and she doesn't know he's giving away all this money. And
otherwise, Vernon's character is completely normal in every way.
just born dead and a money slave. Other than that. Yeah.
Okay. I'm just listing off a bunch of favorite ones. I haven't even let you guys get anything in. But I'll go with another line. It's a really subtle line, but I've thought about it after the fact a few times. They're talking about getting a weed card. Everyone is, and they're like talking about reasons to get a weed.
You're about to say,
and he said, and Vernon says is his reason. I just said I saw a dog. And the other character says, "Did you?" And he goes, "No, man, total lie. I didn't see a dog all day."
Just make that
on TV, sure. He goes on.
You can't turn on a TV without seeing 4 or 5 of them shits.
Yeah,
or something like
exactly.
That.
There's a lot of people in the chat that want to learn how to become a financial dominator. A bunch of ladies here are saying, "How can I do that?"
Send me an email. I got you.
I don't know how you do that, but I don't imagine it would be very hard. You just got to figure out what website where those people want to get hooked up, and maybe read some of the books and know what you got to do. But
Money Slaving 101.
Seems like a good
it's
gig.
money slavers.
Money slavery, yeah. Money slavery. How to be a money slave lord.
Just treat a rich guy like shit and you take all his money. I would do that. Hell. Seems easy. I was doing that weed card, that whole scene.
Yeah.
I'm doing it, and I was so distracted the whole time because one of my musical heroes, Ben Folds, is literally sitting right next to me, and I was like, I can't believe I'm acting right next to Ben Folds. It was crazy.
You got to tell him what Brick was about.
That's right.
That was good too. Okay, I got one more moment that I got to share from this, and maybe you guys have something else. But mine is when, I think it's in the horror movie episode where you guys go to the horror house. You say they've got a real life Babadook, right? And then you get this other line that you say during one of those long monologue speeches that you give, where you like pour your heart out, and you say, "I regret seeing the Babadook. It's so scary, you guys. Do not see the Babadook." That's what you had to get out there.
That was my favorite line. I do not see that. You were so emphatic. And my favorite moment was definitely you and Paul in the bathroom. That was so funny.
And then, so one of my favorite moments, besides the podcast stuff, which is obviously,
we already mentioned
talked about that at the beginning,
yes.
but the road trip with Paul. Now, for people who haven't seen the show, Paul is an extremely straight-laced, but
he's a nerd.
Super intelligent, like financial math genius type. And despite what how goofy we made your character sound, Vernon is an orthopedic surgeon.
Yeah, he's a doctor.
So he's not, he's not a dummy. He's just crazy.
I don't know how good a doctor he is. Not really sure.
Somehow he got the title orthopedic surgeon. How he got
a lot of trash juice for a guy who does surgery.
Trash juice. I forgot about the trash juice. Now, what is trash juice made out of again? I forget.
Whatever he has.
Punch.
Yeah, it's just booze,
it's just alcoholic punch.
Fruit punch.
Whatever you can sneak in.
Yeah. It's whatever.
Whenever you can get into popcorn tins. Yeah, exactly.
So you guys run away from your wives in this scene. And
it's a whole bottle episode
for understandable reasons.
Yeah.
they also would have understandable reasons to have been running away from their husbands. So let's be clear. The show is called You're the Worst, but it really could apply to any of the characters.
It's a running joke of the show is at what points you'll go, oh, that's the worst.
Yeah.
You know,
and how many times can you top that point?
It's actually difficult to figure out who the actual worst is.
I think.
You think? Yeah, Sean thinks Lindsay's the worst. Maybe. I don't know.
Really?
I don't know. I think I'm not a fan of Jimmy lately, so I don't know. And Gretchen's been pretty awful too. I don't think Lindsay's the worst.
I don't know who the worst is.
I think she's too dumb to truly
not
be the
Edgar.
worst. It's not Edgar.
He's not the worst. He's probably the best.
Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, if you really break it down, you know, and I love Janet Varney so much.
Becca's the worst.
I would say Becca's the worst.
She's really bad. She is really bad.
But the shit she says to Vernon is just, I mean, as bad a douche as Vernon is, boy, is she mean.
She is very mean.
That moment from the latest episode, or no, it wasn't the latest one, it was the one before, where she comes after Hillary Clinton there. I forget what exactly she says, but she like says something like we'll get her emails or something.
Yeah.
And she's just like drinking while pregnant, like no problem.
Yeah, I can have one.
Yeah.
That's a good reason to call her the worst.
Yeah, it is. It's true.
But it's not like Lindsay wouldn't do that too, right?
No, Lindsay would.
Well, I think Becca's a lot smarter than Lindsay. I do.
It's worse for Becca to do it because she should know better.
And both of them, like,
I think that's it. Yeah.
And it's said that Lindsay got married to be married first. So she could marry before your characters did, but it's also it's very clear that they're competitive about everything, and it's entirely possible that that's an extension of her marrying you to as a competitive thing, you know, to just be like, oh, my husband's a surgeon. It's like, oh, my husband's a banking executive, and yeah.
Were you building it to a certain moment from that episode? Where
no, I love because the campfire. When they're building the fire together and yelling, oh.
One thing I appreciate about the show, in the same way I kind of build up Game of Thrones by talking about how diverse it is, how many different types of things it does. I feel that way about You're the Worst also. It has these just preposterously hilarious moments, but it also is like pulling tears out of me sometimes. Like, man, this is really sad. This is really dark. And they also kind of play around with the types of episodes they have. The opener of this season was like a very unique episode of Jimmy. From among the episodes of this season, but also TV in general. The show where you guys go out in the woods, they get a range of different types of episodes coming out of You're the Worst, and I appreciate that they can have episodes focused on your character. There are a couple of more central characters, but the secondary and tertiary characters are also interesting, and as the seasons go, we get more and more of them too. So.
I'll tell you, I was really excited to get a Vernon and Paul episode because I love both of you guys, but now I think we need to get a Sam Dresden and Honey Nuts and Shit Stain episode.
That would be amazing.
I'm dying to see more of them. They crack me up so much.
Has Vernon interacted with them?
Have you? I don't think I have. You would know.
That needs to happen.
No.
That would be great.
I agree.
I think it hasn't happened yet because when it does, that's just going to take over the show. That's going to be definitely.
Like,
maybe that's why they're not doing that.
Saving it for.
We just take over the whole network.
Yeah, they would just
Your character hanging out with those characters would be a ball. I mean, that would be.
It would be. I think the comic potential of that, and just the way Vernon would interact with anyone of color.
Anyone. Oh yeah, anyone of color.
That's part of how I take your character is that you've kind of like gone through these steps that you're supposed to do in life. You went to school, you became a doctor, you got married, but you don't want to do all that. You want to do what you want to do, whether
go in your man cave
or giving all your money away, or like you.
And Vernon would work so hard to be cool with a bunch of rappers.
Yeah,
I mean, I just think,
and then sometimes you'll try too hard and they'll make fun of you or scoff at you, but sometimes you'll be down to do things that other people won't, and they'll be so excited to have you with them, right?
They'll be able to get me to do anything. That's another element of it.
We have a couple people, at least one person I can see. I'm pretty sure other people said it before earlier in the chat. We have people volunteering to start watching You're the Worst if you watch Game of Thrones.
All right, you're on. I'll watch Game of Thrones. You guys watch You're the Worst. I'll totally do that.
Also, anyone watching, make sure to hit the like button. Help us get this episode noticed a little more. Help expose
Watch Film
You're the
Pigs.
Worst a little more. As
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
Watch Film Pigs,
You have
too.
to watch
Oh,
reviews
yeah.
of
Yeah,
things.
it's Film Pigs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
go to filmpigs.com and check that out. Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I guess that's about it. We're about 11 minutes past when we said we'd let you go by.
Yeah, so I'm glad you were able to stay a little extra time with us, and glad just in general you came.
Yeah,
and
let me just
came to
say,
join
by
our
the way,
show.
here, this never would have happened if Sean wasn't on Twitter right here. He got on Twitter within the last maybe 6 months, and he's just totally new to the experience. He's just willing to tweet at you and ask you to be on our show, which is honestly something we would never have done because I don't know, we're too good for that. I don't know why we wouldn't do it because now it worked out obviously, so maybe we should be doing that. So we have Sean to
Well,
thank.
yeah, I would say if you want someone on your show, you just ask.
Yeah,
if they
it's
say
true.
no, you move on. If they
Yeah.
say yes, then you got a guest on your show. That's what I do with my shows.
Yeah,
Hey, do you
we're
wanna
gonna do
be-
it more. We're gonna try it more. I'm gonna make Sean do it every time.
Yeah, when I was doing when the Film Pigs were doing the web series, I remember when we first started, we weren't having guests. We were just trying to figure it out. And then I wound up on a podcast with Matt Walsh. That
Yeah,
dude, he's
I know
on
Matt
Veep
Walsh,
and
yeah.
one of the founders of UCB. This
Yeah,
guy's
of course,
hilarious.
of course. Yeah, he is hilarious.
So we were just talking on mic, and after the show, I was like, "Oh, I do this thing. Would you do it?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Oh, okay."
I did see that you had him on there, and I was wondering if you had been involved in UCB at some point. And I crossed my mind. I didn't research it further. I was like, I guess they're friends. I noticed.
No, I
it,
just
for sure.
asked him.
That's
I asked him,
awesome.
and he did it. And then his wife did too, and she's hilarious as well.
I
so.
had one question before we wrapped up, actually. For Film Pigs and all that, did you get the role on You're the Worst because you were friends with Stephen Falk and you'd done stuff before, or did you guys work together because of that, or how did things happen there?
I've managed to eke my way into something on most of the stuff he works on, but it's not. I don't get handed it at all. I have to. He's a way in through the door, absolutely, but I still have to read for it because there's all these other people involved,
Okay,
and they don't
cool.
know.
Competitive,
how I-
yeah.
So it wasn't like you guys knew each other and he was like, "This is my Vernon," or anything. He was like, "I want to have a character named
Well,
Vernon. You would be good."
And I'll tell you what. For the pilot. The character I went out for, it was 2 lines,
Mm-hmm.
and the character's name was simply Groom. It was not named Dr. Vernon Barbara.
Oh, because he
So-
was just the
Of course.
the first
No,
scene is in the
it
wedding,
just-
right?
Yeah, it's just I just got lucky in that the network people liked me enough in those 2 lines, and I ad-libbed a third, and
Nice.
then they were like, "Yeah, write more for that." So they did, and it's just bananas, fun, and good. So
Yeah.
I got really lucky.
That's lucky for us too.
Did Stephen Falk get catapulted into doing You're the Worst off the backs of his work with you on Film Pigs? Is that
No, Falk did it all on his own. I mean, we went to acting school together, and he was an actor originally, and he came out here, and he did not care for the audition process and all that. So he decided he wanted to be a writer and just became kind of a dedicated student of the industry and figured out what he could write that would sell, and that's sort of what he's been doing. I didn't help him at all.
Yeah, I think he's nailing
doing
it.
it on his own.
All my favorite shows right now are on the surface comedies that actually have these deep, sad, dark, serious moments. I think that's.
You know what?
We had a quick question.
I meant to bring that up actually. That's just something that You're the Worst has sort of in common with Game of Thrones. It's crazy. It's got so much going on. It's chaotic. It's hilarious. But there's real character growth and real storyline, like real arcs. And it's not just like a sitcom where like everything is back to the way it's like every episode doesn't relate to any other episode. It's not. It's very much
Right.
It's very plot driven, and
They're
I love that
consistent.
about it.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
had
That is cool.
We had a quick question here before we let you go. In our chat, who she wants to know, how was it to be on Hawaii 5-0? That's her big question.
That is probably one of the better guest star gigs I've ever gotten because, they fly you first class. They have to.
Oh, yeah, nice.
Oh,
Contracts.
nice.
They fly you first class to Hawaii. I worked, I think 4 of 8 days that I was there. So I had 4 days free in Hawaii, and they put you up in a fancy hotel. So it was great.
Yeah.
And also, I actually watched that show. I like the action shows.
Yeah.
So it was fun to meet Alex O'Loughlin, especially. I totally man crushed on him during the shoot. He's just a cool Aussie dude. He's as gorgeous as he is. He's very down to earth, and it was cool to get roughed up by him and Scott Conn. So it was a good fun show to do.
Nice.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds like a blast. All right.
So I think this is what we would want to do here. Since we're wrapping things up here, but you're going to try out Game of Thrones, presumably. It sounds like we at least got you to try it. If you like it and you watch it, we'll have you back on, and we can have a second follow up, and
when you
everybody.
Watch it and you don't like it, you get to yell at us however you choose.
Yeah. We can have the follow up either way. You can tell us why you didn't like it, but if either way, and everybody else who's talking about watching You're the Worst will also.
You guys better watch it. I'm telling you.
Come back, and
we'll
be able to have a combo Game of Thrones You're the Worst fest.
That sounds like a plan. I'm into it.
Cool.
All right.
Well, thanks so much for coming. This was awesome. This was great. It was
Thanks
really random.
for having me.
Yeah, good job, Sean.
Thanks.
So
Glad you got on Twitter.
I sure you got Janice Griffith.
Yeah. Very nice woman. She's well spoken.
All right, so it's time for our outro music and all that.
Yes, thank you everybody for
Thank
joining.
you.
Thanks to everybody who showed up live. Thanks to everybody who's hit the like button and is going to check out You're the Worst, because we'll certainly have more to say about it. And check out our secondary podcast, Fandom Media, which the audio version of this will be on, as well as on Todd. You're going to put this up as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure where.
What's the?
I'm gonna. I have another podcast that I call the Toncast, where the host is always different and the very special guest is always me.
Oh,
So
okay. Well, perfect. This is perfect.
Put that up there, and it works perfectly.
Yeah,
Well,
that's very
great.
cool.
Very
All
good.
right.
Okay, everybody. Thanks for coming, and we'll be back again shortly. We've got another.
We've got our Blackfish episode coming out to non-Patreon people.
Yep,
Yeah.
our full release of the Blackfish episode is Wednesday, and if different patrons have access to it already, but we are fully back into the book material, but we'll keep these live streams coming as well. They are just something to have in between, something to hang out, something to have fun with. We'll be having a variety of different guests, and we'll be letting you know what those are going to be as we get them scheduled. So thanks again, everybody. And Valar rewatch us. Valar reweed us. Valar
Reweed
reweed us.
Valar
That
Mortatis.
Valar
works.
Mortatis.
That works. All right.